It shouldn't have to be the responsibility of the store to make sure that people buy the right thing, but at the end of the day, they need to not sell things that are downright harmful for the animals that they're claiming to care for. Many people take really good care of their pets, but unfortunately there are also those who don't, and certain species are more likely to be neglected and mistreated than others. And those species are those that fall into the categories of small and exotic pets. These are your guinea pigs, your hamsters, your rabbits, birds, fish, reptiles. These animals are commonly neglected and mistreated due to a fundamental misunderstanding of their needs, their care, their behavior, and their intelligence. Some people think that because these pets are small, that they're easier and they need less care, but this really couldn't be further from the truth. Animals are complicated no matter the size. These animals being exotics means that they need complex care, enclosures, and very specialized nutrition. Rodents, reptiles, and fish are commonly impulse purchases at pet stores, so people fail to do the necessary research and the animals suffer because of it. Small pets like rodents are commonly put into uncomfortable situations for the owner's enjoyment and entertainment. Not necessarily on purpose, most people don't really realize the distress that they're causing their pet, but the unfortunate truth is that there are those who just don't care. Everybody loves dogs and cats, but not everybody loves rodents, reptiles, and fish, so people are less likely to speak up when they see abuse and neglect. And most people are uneducated on small and exotic pets, so they don't actually have the knowledge required to spot neglect for these species. Which is what I'm here to help with today. I'm not a veterinarian and I'm not a species expert on these animals by any means, but I have learned a lot over the years being a crazed animal lady, and I've also done a ton of research to make sure that I'm giving you guys the best information possible. So hopefully I can share some valuable information and make the world a little bit better for these little critters. Guinea pigs are a popular kids' pet, but unfortunately their needs are more commonly neglected than actually met. Guinea pigs are highly social animals that deteriorate when they're kept in solitary confinement, and yet an astonishing amount of people will keep only one guinea pig at a time. In the wild, guinea pigs typically live in groups of 3 to 10, so understandably, social interaction with members of their own species is incredibly important for their mental and physical well-being. And no, I'm sorry, you don't count as proper social interaction for your guinea pig. That doesn't mean that guinea pigs don't like humans or don't value them or can't get anything out of interacting with them, but unfortunately, you are not a replacement for another member of your guinea pig's species. A lot of people will try to say,
oh, well, like, I play with my guinea pig every day, so it's okay.
I'm sure that helps, but it's not a replacement for another guinea pig. In Switzerland, it's actually illegal to keep a guinea pig on their own. Guinea pigs are also highly active and need a lot of room to run around and stretch their legs. And pretty much every commercial cage is too small. Do not buy a guinea pig cage from the pet store. It is a complete waste of money. Unless things have completely changed since the last time I was there, none of those cages are big enough. The minimum recommended cage size for 2 guinea pigs is 7.5 square feet, but 10.5 square feet is a lot more comfortable. You can do a homemade wooden or CNC cage, or you can do what I did and utilize a puppy playpen with fake flooring underneath and then bedding on top, obviously. Let me be really clear though, this cage size, it's not a if you can give them that amount of space. It's give them this amount of space or don't get guinea pigs at all. Because cages like this are neglect and abusive. A lot of guinea pig owners overlook just how important coat and nail health is for their guinea pig. Especially if you have a long-haired guinea pig, you need to be brushing them to prevent matting, and their nails really need to be clipped regularly. If they're not, they can grow way too long into uncomfortable positions, they can curve around, they can bend in ways that they shouldn't, and in severe cases, they can even curve around and grow into the pads on the bottom of their feet. So you're gonna have to learn how to be comfortable with clipping their nails. Do your research about their nails though, because they are very similar to dogs in that they basically have a quick that you cannot cut. If your guinea pig has white or clear nails, then that's gonna be really easy because you'll be able to see it. If they have black nails, it's going to be a little bit trickier, but that's something that you're going to have to get comfortable with if you're going to have guinea pigs, because it is very hard to find an exotic vet for guinea pigs, and you're not really going to want to pay to take them in to get their nails clipped every time it needs to happen. The diet of a guinea pig is also very commonly overlooked. Most people do know that the vast majority of their diet is supposed to be hay, and that is awesome. But a lot of people make mistakes in the pelleted food department, because yes, guinea pigs should get some form of pelleted food, not a lot, but just enough to make sure that they're getting the vitamins and minerals that they need, in addition to some fresh veggies. But you got to be really careful about what kind of pellet that you're getting. A lot of people will get these pellet and seed mixes that are really colorful and look really exciting, kind of look like Fruit Loops almost, thinking that they're healthy or that they've got to be tasty because they look really cool. They may be tasty, but unfortunately they are not healthy. For the most part, when it comes to guinea pig pelleted food, the more boring it looks, the healthier it is. Sticking with the rodents, another popular pet amongst children are hamsters. Small, fluffy little critters that parents often impulse buy for their kids. Or just buy for their kids. It's not always an impulse purchase, but sometimes it is. And unfortunately, most parents do follow pet store advice on their hamsters' care. I'm not saying that there are no good pet store employees. There are definitely a lot of really good pet store employees, but there are also a lot who lack the knowledge to give you proper information, and there are some people who also just aren't going to care that much. And many pet stores also just sell cages, equipment, and food that is completely incompatible with the animal that they're selling it for. People often buy hamsters because their kid wants a little fluffy pet to cuddle and play with. But hamsters are incredibly sensitive and nocturnal. They can get pretty grumpy and nippy if you wake them up for a nap to play with them or to cuddle with them. And a lot of them also don't really want to cuddle or play. Some of them do, some of them don't. They need a very soft touch. You have to be gentle with them, and this can be very difficult for many young children. Because of how delicate hamsters are, if you squeeze them or drop them by accident, it's likely going to mean a trip to the vet. But a lot of people also don't even take their hamsters to the vet. I've actually talked to people who didn't even know that you could take a hamster to the vet. They were like, oh, I didn't know hamster vets were a thing. Which, I mean, if you've never been told, understandable why you wouldn't know, but it's just unfortunate when those people are the people who have hamsters or at one point did have hamsters. Just like guinea pigs, hamsters need adequate space that is often not given to them. And most pet store cages are also way too small, in floor space and in depth. One thing that hamsters need that guinea pigs don't is the ability to burrow. They like to dig. They need to be able to dig to feel safe and to be healthy. So they need a lot of bedding to dig through. 8 to 10 inches worth of bedding to burrow in is usually the recommended minimum, but if you can add more, the more the better. Hamsters with deeper bedding have also been shown to spend less time running on a wheel and less time participating in behaviors like wire cage biting. Most pet store cages do not have a deep enough tray at the bottom to fill with enough bedding to allow for proper burrowing, and most pet store cages are also wire cages, which are not the best option for hamsters because hamsters are kind of escape artists and it's really easy for them to escape out of wire cages. As far as cage size goes, for a Syrian hamster, which is like a regular sized hamster, 100 by 50 by 50 centimeters is generally recognized as the recommended minimum. Pet stores sell smaller cages because they're cheaper to make, so they're cheaper to sell, and people are more likely to buy it if it's cheaper. And if they're smaller, it also means they take up less space on your dresser or your bookshelf, and that has a certain appeal to a lot of people as well. But hamsters in cages that are too small live miserable lives. A lot of people will opt for using tanks or IKEA furniture hacks or do other things to make completely homemade cages. If you need some inspo, I will link some useful YouTube videos down below so that you can get an idea of what we're looking for when we're looking for good quality and enriching hamster cages or enclosures. Most hamster wheels are also too small. And wheels that are too small can cause severe pain due to repeated and prolonged spinal curvature. Wheels with a 28 or 30 centimeter diameter are typically recognized as the recommended minimum for a Syrian hamster. There's also the matter of hamster balls. Some people go back and forth on these still, but the RSPCA has stated that they believe hamster balls to be dangerous and stressful. When in a ball, the hamster has no control over their surroundings, and they also have no access to food or water. They also don't have great eyesight, and when they're in the ball, they don't really have the use of their other senses like smell or touch, so it can make it difficult for them to move it around, and that can also stress them out. If you want to allow your hamster the ability to explore, it's best to give them a safe space to free roam in a room that is, closed off, no vents they can get into. I'm sorry, I'm looking down because there's a vent right there. No vents they can get into, no windows they can climb out of, no furniture with like small openings underneath that they can get stuck in. Have a room that you can easily hamster-proof and allow them to free roam and explore. Rabbits are one of the most commonly neglected pets. They're often bought for kids who really want them in the moment, and they kind of get treated like a toy for a couple months until the kid loses interest. Because rabbits are prey animals, they commonly hide signs of illness. Anyone keeping a rabbit needs to be able to detect these subtle signs of illness and injuries so that they can take them to the vet before things get too serious. Rabbits are highly social animals, and yet only 18% of them are actually kept with another rabbit. There's a lot of discourse about whether or not rabbits need to be kept with another member of their own species. I think whenever possible, it's best to allow them to have another member of their species as a companion. Same goes for any animal that is socially dependent by nature. But because there are experts who kind of go back and forth and say, well, if you as the owner are spending a lot of time interacting with them, it can be okay. Because people disagree on it, I'm not going to make an outright statement of neglect about rabbits that are kept alone, but it is something to think about if you're going to get a rabbit. Think about whether or not you can get two, and if you can't get two, think about whether or not you're able to give the rabbit enough time to compensate for that lack of, rabbit companionship. You're going to start seeing a pattern here with all of these animals because rabbits are also commonly kept in spaces that are way too small for them. I think this becomes a pattern with a lot of different animals because we as humans tend to have the instinct to want to make animals fit into our lives as opposed to how we fit into their lives and how we can make their lives as good as possible. A lot of people will get these little hutches thinking that it's enough space, and it's not. For rabbits, the best option is really to have a room in your house that is the rabbit room, and it's rabbit proofed and it's full of all of their food, their toys and everything, and that's their space to free roam, or to rabbit proof your house and allow them to free roam the whole house, because you can make your house safe for a rabbit just like you can make it safe for a dog, and rabbits can actually be litter box trained just like cats can, so you don't have to worry about poop all over the house. But one of the biggest, most common, and most deadly mistake that rabbit owners make is underestimating how much water they need. A lot of people think that because rabbits are small pets, they don't need a lot of water and they'll need what a guinea pig needs. But in reality, a rabbit will drink just as much water in a day as a small dog will. And they will not be able to get that water from one of those classic cage water bottles. Dehydration is really serious and really dangerous for any species, and a lot of rabbits die because owners underestimate how much water their rabbits need, and they think that cage water bottles are a safe option for the species. There is recent data to suggest that 75% of rabbits kept in the UK are mistreated. A majority of rabbit owners, when asked, didn't know what the proper diet for their rabbit was. And almost half of them didn't know that a rabbit needed space to exercise. This is just one example of how one of the biggest threats facing our pets is a lack of education, a lack of knowledge, and the spreading of misinformation. Birds are another commonly neglected and mistreated pet, mostly because of the lack of understanding of their needs. Birds are notorious for hiding signs of illness, to a problematic extent, to the point where it is common for birds not to show signs of illness until they are on their deathbed. Even the most educated and experienced bird owners can miss these signs. Many bird species can live really long lives, decades. They can live for decades, and a lot of people don't realize this prior to getting one. Birds are a huge commitment, and you need to make sure that you are ready to take care of that bird for the entirety of its lifespan. It is so common for birds to end up rehomed, abandoned, or dropped off at shelters when an owner decides that they're no longer up to the task of taking care of that bird because it's been alive for 25 years and I don't want to take care of it for another 25. That's one of those things that you have to research beforehand. If you're not ready to take care of a bird for 50 years, Don't get a bird. Birds need a social companion, typically one of their own species because they've evolved to live in flocks. But some individuals will form a pair bond with a human, and in those cases, it is believed to be okay and acceptable to keep a bird on its own. But it's important to have a firm understanding of bird behavior and body language so that you can determine whether or not you are in a pair bond with your bird. Many birds are kept in cages that are far too small for them to be able to fulfill their exercise requirements. Many full-time caged birds will experience stress, frustration, and anxiety due to the lack of movement and stimulation. Caged birds can become incredibly bored, which can lead to problematic behaviors like feather plucking and other unfortunate side effects like inappetence. It is very important that if your bird is spending any time in a cage, that cage is an appropriate size for the size and species of bird that you have. If you're keeping your bird in a cage, it's really important to allow them to have at least some time outside of the cage to stretch their wings properly, fly around, and explore. Just make sure that your windows and doors are closed first. There are a lot of people who will allow their bird to be outside of the cage pretty much whenever they're home to monitor them, and then the cage is for, the nighttime or when they're out of the house, kind of like a crate for a dog. Obviously, the best possible case scenario for a bird would be to be in a large aviary where they can move around and behave as freely and naturally as possible. But large indoor cages with lots of free flying time can also allow your bird to live a happy and fulfilled life. Birds are really prone to respiratory infections, so you gotta make sure that you are being very diligent about cleaning the cage properly. Diet is one of the biggest complexities when it comes to birds, and unfortunately one of the areas in which they are most commonly mistreated. Obesity and liver disease are really common in pet birds because a lot of people don't have a very good understanding of what their bird's nutritional requirements are. A lot of people think that seed is all a bird needs. Not true, unfortunately. Now, you should obviously do your own research on the nutritional requirements for the species that you have, but it is also best to get some guidance from your vet because properly balancing a diet for a bird can be really, really tricky. And part of that is because we don't fully know the entirety of the nutritional requirements for some bird species, so it's best to talk to your vet so you can get as much information as possible. Obesity is just so common amongst pet birds because in the wild, birds spend about 80% of their day foraging for food. That's a big chunk of their time budget. Since in captivity they don't have to forage for their food, they can eat really fast, eat too much, get bored, and then you have a chunky bird. So it's best to feed as much of their food in puzzles as possible. This way they have to keep their brains engaged and they have to work for it. Also slows them down. You can put food into like little cardboard boxes or envelopes that they have to pull apart to get the food out of. You can put multiple dishes around the cage or around, the room that they fly in. You can scatter food across the ground in the cage. And adding things like toys, ladders, and swings to their cage or plants and branches that they can climb on are also great ways to help keep your bird active and entertained. Reptiles have evolved to live in very complex habitats that can be really hard to properly replicate in captivity. A lot of reptiles are kept in very spatially limited enclosures. There is a common but false belief that reptiles are really simple and highly adaptive, but in reality, they're actually not as biologically or behaviorally flexible as other animals, so it can be harder for them to cope in inadequate environments. Reptiles also aren't really like mammalian pets. They're not really domesticated, they're technically captive. So their enclosure really needs to be as close to their natural habitat as possible. A lot of them need to be able to hunt, climb, burrow, some of them need to be able to swim. And unfortunately, a lot of enclosures just really allow them to perch, hide, and eat. Reptiles' needs vary so much species to species. There are so many different kinds of reptiles, so I can't really tell you like the minimum space requirements for a reptile because there are everything from geckos to snakes to lizards. Like, it really, really varies. So you just really got to do your research. You really got to do your due diligence. Reptiles are also a lot more cognitively complex than a lot of people realize. As humans, we often talk about our reptilian brain, which is our fight or flight response. And so a lot of people hear this and then they think that that's all that reptiles are. They're fight or flight. Like, they think eat, poop, sleep, and that's it. But recent research has actually shown us that a lot of species can count, they can navigate mazes, they can solve food puzzles, and some of them use tools, which is so cool. Many reptiles need highly specialized diets that are not as simple as just feeding some frozen mice or worms. For many reptiles, UVB light is also really, really important for their health. Without it, they are unable to synthesize vitamin D3, metabolize calcium, or have a properly functioning nervous system. But a lot of people will just get a heat lamp and call it a day. Unfortunately, that's not adequate for most reptiles. Most reptiles also need very particular temperature and humidity levels. A lot of them have basically evolved to move between a lot of different microclimates, so we have to be able to replicate that as best as possible. Dehydration is also really common amongst pet reptiles because a lot of people think that, just supplying like a water bowl or a water dish is enough, but a lot of reptiles actually need to be able to soak themselves to properly hydrate themselves and properly absorb water, and also to promote proper skin health. A lack of veterinary care is also really common for reptiles. This is partially because some owners don't realize that their reptile needs vet care, and partially because a lot of people don't realize that there's something wrong until their reptile is displaying really late stage signs of disease or injury, or until they're dead. Again, this goes back to a lack of knowledge and understanding about the animal's needs, their care, their behavior, their ecological needs. There really is a difference between surviving and thriving, and unfortunately, a lot of pet reptiles are just surviving. Fish are arguably the most commonly neglected and abused pets, and in my opinion, pet stores deserve a huge chunk of the blame for that. Fish are partially more likely to be abused and neglected because they don't make facial expressions the same way that mammalian pets do. They can't scream when they're in pain. They can't come to you and whine when they're hungry and need to be fed. Most fish are not abused or neglected out of malice. It is simply because people just don't know any better. I certainly didn't for the several goldfish and betta fish that I had growing up. Last year I was going through a phase where I really wanted another pet and I really wanted to get a betta fish. So I started diving really deep into research because I did not really remember much about their care. And what I realized through doing all of this research was that every betta fish I have ever had was neglected. I felt so terrible. I still do. I still feel terrible. And I know that as a kid, I didn't know any better, but that's not an excuse. I definitely took better care of my fish than some people do, but their care was still severely lacking in many ways, and I'm gonna have to live with that. But I realized just how complicated proper fish care is, and I realized that fish are not good children's pets. They are not good starter pets. Although there really is no such thing as an easy starter pet. Betta fish in particular are really, really popular. These are the fish that you see in those tiny empty cups on shelves in pet stores. And I know that they're kept that way in pet stores because there's not a lot of room, and bettas, they can't be kept with other fish because they'll fight and kill them. But that's not a fair way to keep a fish. That's like keeping a dog in a crate 24/7, never letting them out for days to weeks on end. Betta fish actually need upwards of 10 gallons to really thrive. Fish are often the forgotten pet. Kids or full-grown adults forget to feed them and they starve. It's also not unheard of for fish to be flushed when they're actually still alive. There are so many different species of fish and they all have different needs. Fish can actually live a lot longer than most people think. Under the right conditions, goldfish can actually live for decades. Decades. Why is it so widely accepted that goldfish just live for a year or two and then they die? I don't think I ever had a goldfish live longer than 2 years and it felt long to us. No, they can live for 20 to 30 years if they're cared for properly. Again, like all of the other animals we've talked about, one of the most common mistakes is keeping fish in tanks that are too small. And this can be deadly for fish in a way that it isn't for other animals. Fish produce a lot of ammonia in their waste, and when their tank is really small, the concentration of ammonia builds up really, really quickly, and that can be so detrimental to their health. Many fish also need really specific temperature ranges and live plants to really thrive in their habitat. Fish are also the only animals given out as prizes, which is barbaric when you think about it. A lot of fish die at festivals and fairs when they are given out as prizes for games. And when you really think about it, giving an animal as a prize should be illegal. You wouldn't do that with a dog, so why would you do it with a fish? Just because they're not a mammal doesn't mean that they deserve any less than any other animal. And when fish aren't transported properly, they can die from shock, oxygen starvation, or temperature fluctuation. All of these common mistakes are almost exclusively due to what we as a society have deemed to be an acceptable life for a fish. And so much of this is what pet stores tell you. They will sell you that tiny fish bowl with a little fake plant, some colorful rocks, and a treasure chest. Pet stores, in my opinion, are one of the biggest perpetrators for the mistreatment of fish and all of these species that we've talked about. Now, obviously, pet store employees can't control what you buy, and they also definitely cannot control what the store sells. So I'm not blaming the employees. I mean, there are a couple employees who, know better and don't care, but there are a lot of great pet store employees out there. I'm mostly blaming the actual corporations. Stores like PetSmart and Petco need to stop selling inadequate cages, tanks, and food for these animals because people will buy what is available. As much as I firmly believe that everyone needs to be doing copious amounts of research before getting a pet, I know that not everybody will. There will always be impulse purchases, and there will always be people who think that it just doesn't matter. And those people are likely to buy whatever is cheapest. Because if the pet store sells it, it can't possibly be bad for the pet, right? Pet stores are a business like any other in this day and age, and at the end of the day, most of them only care about money. So they will sell tiny fish bowls, unhealthy and dangerous guinea pig pellets, and a whole host of cages that are not only subpar, but downright abusive. It shouldn't have to be the responsibility of the store to make sure that people buy the right thing, but at the end of the day, they need to not sell things that are downright harmful for the animals that they're claiming to care for. I'm not even going to touch on the topic of buying animals from pet stores because that needs a whole video on its own, but honestly, pet stores on this continent need a serious revamp. In general, when it comes to animals and when it comes to our pets, we as a society need to be better about doing our due diligence and doing the research required to be able to properly care for our pets. With dogs and cats, medical neglect is not nearly as common because everybody knows that their dog and their cat needs to go to the vet. But a surprising amount of people don't realize that their hamster, their bird, or even sometimes their fish need to go to the vet too. Small pets are commonly treated as toys or objects rather than actual living beings, and this is a mindset that seriously needs to change. And I think that starts with people educating themselves and then educating their kids on proper etiquette when handling and interacting with animals. At the end of the day, if you're ever unsure of anything, ask for help. There are tons of awesome pet care Facebook groups out there that share tips. You can find forums online. And of course, if you're ever really unsure or concerned about anything, ask your vet. And like I said, a lot of people do take really, really good care of their small and exotic pets, but it is important that we highlight these patterns of mistreatment so that we can educate each other, educate ourselves, and strive to make things better in the future. For so many people, they just simply don't know. It is simply a lack of knowledge that is influencing the lack of care. And that's why I make these videos, to try and help people make better decisions for their animals. Even if this video only reaches one person and it teaches that person one thing, that will have made all of the countless hours of research, scripting, filming, and editing worth it. If you've ever made mistakes in your pet's care, it's okay. I have too. It's a lot like parenting, or so I've been told. You're bound to make mistakes, but what really matters is that you recognize those mistakes and work to do better in the future. One of the hardest things in life is to admit that you've made a mistake. And admitting that you don't know something or that you need help is harder still. But there are people out there who can and want to help you. So just ask. Okay guys, that is what I've got for you today. I know that this was probably a really long one, but I think that it was an important one. Thank you guys for being patient because I know that I announced I would be doing this video probably over a month ago, but the research for this video took a lot longer than expected. A lot of people requested animals to be included in the video that I didn't know quite as much about, and so I really took the time to do the research to make sure that I was giving you correct information. But I hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can leave all of your thoughts in the comments along with any potential video topic requests that you have. I would love to hear all of your thoughts and your experiences with your pets. You can follow me over on TikTok and Instagram if you would like to see more of my everyday life with my pets. I try to post on my Instagram story pretty much every day, and I'm hoping to do more educational short form content, which will be on TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. But that is all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, until I see you in the next one, please remember to think critically and do your research.